Ever found yourself at a tasting, nodding along knowingly while someone's going on about cask strength whiskey?
Yeah.
Well, today's deep dive, we're going to make those scenarios a thing of the past.
Yeah.
We're diving into the world of whiskey cask strength versus diluted. We're going to give you the knowledge to navigate those conversations like a pro. And hey, you might even discover what your palate really enjoys along the way.
And it all starts, really, with just understanding a simple but pretty powerful acronym, ABV.
Okay, so break it down for us. What exactly is ABV? And why is it so important in the world of whiskey?
So ABV stands for alcohol by volume, and essentially it's just the measure of how much alcohol is present in your drink. Think of it as the key to really understanding the intensity and the flavor profile of your whiskey.
So higher ABV, more powerful flavor, right?
Yeah.
But there's got to be a range. Yeah, I mean, not all whiskey is created equal when it comes to ABV.
You're exactly right. You'll see whiskey with an ABV anywhere from around 40% on the lower end.
Which, fun fact for our listeners, that's actually the legal minimum for Scotch whiskey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you see it all the way up to 65% or even higher for those cask strength bottle.
Ooh, okay. This is where things get really interesting. So for our listeners who are maybe just, dipping their toes into the world of whiskey, can you walk us through the difference between cask strength and diluted whiskey?
Absolutely. So imagine this. A cask strength whiskey, it's bottled directly from the cask. It's capturing the whiskey's full, completely unadulterated potential.
That's got to pack a punch.
It does. Cask strength whiskeys, they're bottled at a higher ABV, usually between that 55 and 65%, which makes for an incredibly intense and complex flavor experience. But remember, ABV, it isn't the only factor.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What else influences those intense flavors in a cask strength whiskey?
Well, think about it. Every cask is unique, right? The type of oak used, even what was in the cask before, even the humidity, the temperature of the warehouse where it was aged, all of these factors play into a cask's personality, you could say, and ultimately the final flavor of the whiskey.
That's so cool. So each bottle of cask strength whiskey, it's like a snapshot in time, capturing all those unique elements. No wonder whiskey enthusiasts get so passionate about it.
Absolutely. It's about experiencing whiskey in its purest form, really. But for those who maybe find that intensity a bit much, there's diluted whiskey.
So diluted whiskey is essentially cask strength, but it's been, tamed a bit.
In a way, yeah. Distillers add water to the whiskey, bringing the ABV down to a more, I guess you could say, approachable level, typically between 40 and 46%. But here's the key. Dilution isn't about, masking the whiskey's flavor.
It's more about finding a balance, right? Like a chef carefully, adjusting seasonings to create a more harmonious dish.
Exactly. Dilution can actually enhance certain flavors, allowing, subtler notes like fruits or florals or spices to really shine through. And those might have been overshadowed by the alcohol in a cask strength bottling.
Okay, this is already making me rethink how I approach whiskey. So we've got these two distinct approaches to bottling. Cask strength, bottled right from the cask, preserving all those raw, unadulterated flavors. And then we've got diluted whiskey, carefully balanced for a smoother, more approachable experience. But at the end of the day, it's all subjective, right? The best choice. It's just about what you enjoy.
100%. And that's what we're going to dive into next. How do you know which one is right for you?
So we're back to cask strength versus diluted. How do you know which one is your whiskey soulmate?
It's kind of like finding your whiskey soulmate, isn't it? It's all about understanding your own palate and what you enjoy.
Okay, but that's easier said than done. What if you're just starting out? Any advice for our listeners who are maybe feeling a little overwhelmed?
Well, my first tip is simple. Start neat.
Hold on, back up. For those of us, again, who are new to this whole whiskey thing, what does neat even mean?
Oh, good point. Neat just means you're enjoying the whiskey in its, purest form. No ice, no water, just whiskey in the glass. This lets you really appreciate its aroma, the flavor. You get the full picture.
So I'm going in blind for that first sip.
Yeah, exactly. It lets you really experience that ABV. But if you find that the cask strength is a little too much...
Which, let's be real, it could be.
Exactly. That's when you bring in a little water. But here's the thing. It's all about those tiny additions, really small adjustments.
Okay, walk me through this. I've got my cask strength whiskey. I'm feeling adventurous. And, oh no, it's a little too intense. What's my next move?
Grab a dropper if you have one. It gives you the most control. But if not, even a teaspoon will work. Just start with 1 drop, maybe 2, of water, give it a little swirl, and take another sip.
So we're talking really subtle here. How do I know? Like, how do I know when I've added enough water?
Honestly, it's about finding your own sweet spot. You'd be surprised how much those little additions of water can, change things. Like, you might get a whoosh of alcohol at first, but with a drop or two, suddenly you're tasting caramel or oak or a hint of spice.
Okay, this is making me realize there's a real art to this whole tasting thing.
There really is. It's a journey, and that's why I always encourage people to try both cask strength and diluted whiskeys. Maybe you love the intensity of cask strength,
Yeah.
or maybe you're all about the smoothness of a diluted whiskey. There's no wrong answer.
This is so insightful.
Hmm.
So to recap for our listeners who are ready to, start their own tasting adventures.
Yeah.
Start neat, maybe experiment with a little water, but most importantly, don't be afraid to explore. See what you enjoy.
And remember, ABV isn't the only thing that affects a whiskey's flavor. We haven't even talked about the impact of the cask itself.
Oh, right. The type of wood used to make the cask. It's
Oh.
got to make a difference, right?
It's huge. Like, picture this. You have two whiskeys, both bottled at the same ABV, but one was aged in a bourbon barrel and the other one was in a sherry cask. Totally different flavors.
Okay, that's fascinating. Let's dive into the world of cask finishes and how they interact with both cask strength and diluted whiskeys. But first, we've got to take a quick break, back in a flash, to unlock even more whiskey wisdom. Okay, so cask finishes. It sounds like the type of wood used to make the cask can really make or break the flavor.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Something as simple as the wood can have such a huge impact on the final flavor.
So give us the rundown. What are some of the most common cask finishes we might come across, and what kind of flavors are we talking?
Well, you've got your ex-bourbon barrels. Those are the most common. And those will give you those classic notes of vanilla, caramel, maybe a little spice.
Okay, so like those crowd-pleasing flavors. What about something a little more, adventurous?
Then you've got to get into the sherry casks. Those are known for like those really rich, fruity flavors. You get those dried fruits, raisins, figs, and then those warming spices like cinnamon, nutmeg.
Okay, see, now we're talking. So how does this all play into this whole cask strength versus diluted thing?
That's where it gets really interesting. Remember how we were saying earlier that ABV is kind of like a volume knob?
Yeah.
Well, the cask finishes, it's like adding an equalizer to the mix.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So a higher ABV, like in a cask strength whiskey, that's going to really amplify those cask finishes.
Exactly. Think about that sherry cask-aged whiskey we were talking about. If it's cask strength,
Mhm.
those dried fruit notes, the spices, they're going to be front and center, super intense.
That sounds intense. But then in like a diluted whiskey, those flavors are going to be toned down a bit.
Yeah, dilution, it kind of creates a more integrated flavor. The flavors from the cask are still there, but they might be a little softer, more in balance with everything else that's going on in the whiskey.
Wow, this is making me realize just how much goes into a whiskey's flavor. You've got the ABV, the cask,
Yeah.
the aging time. It's like a puzzle.
That's what makes it so fun to explore, though, right? Each bottle is like a little adventure.
So true. So for our listeners who are like ready to go on their own whiskey adventures, any final words of wisdom?
Don't be afraid to try new things. If you always go for bourbon, try a cask strength rye. Or if you like sherry finishes, see what a port cask tastes like. You never know what you might discover.
I love that. Well, this has been an incredible look into the world of whiskey. I know I've learned a ton.
Glad to hear it.
A huge thank you to you for breaking it all down for us today. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on another deep dive. We'll be back next time with another topic. Until then, cheers.